And all those in favor? Any opposed?
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Yeah, it's all your turn.
I think it is, right? All right, so up next is our regional housing needs assessment. First, I can't find the agenda now.
Regional housing needs assessment update.
Yeah, so we presented the regional housing needs assessment, I think, a couple times in, its various forms and now completed form. And really, as I've said before, that for us, this assessment is a tool and a means to continue the conversation on regional housing. That's really the focus for the RPC. And in this case, what we're trying to do is make sure that you understand what's in the document, what's in that assessment, and that you as communities use it to your advantage, use that data to your advantage, and have the conversations that we need to have about moving the needle on housing. So what we wanted to do tonight, before we get to our panel discussion about regional housing and some of these innovative ideas to affordable housing, I wanted to have Jen Rowden come up and just talk about some of the conversations that have been going since we've completed this regional housing needs assessment. So I'll get the slides up, or the slide up.
While we're getting slides up, I'm curious, how many of you have read the regional housing needs assessment that we published on March 1st?
Cover to cover.
How many
Someone on Zoom.
skimmed
posted a
it?
comment
You looked
about
through all the pretty graphics we got.
All right.
It is a very thick document. It is very data heavy. Appendix C has 92 different parameters regarding housing in our region. And that's not counting the different years in all 27 of our communities. There's a lot of data. It's a lot of numbers. From the conversations that we've had with this commission and with this group or other folks, housing is more than just a number. If we could just tell you the number of houses you needed to have or build, this would be easy. Our job would be done. The conversation is the most important part because we're trying to weave housing in with a lot of other competing interests, goals, resources. We cannot solve this without talking about the other things. So I'm going to keep this brief because we really want to hear from our speakers this evening. But I just want to let you know the conversations we're having in our communities. And this is not exhaustive. This is what we know about. So the RPC is having conversations or is aware of conversations actively happening in a good chunk of our communities. In Fremont and Northampton, we had contracted work to work on their master plan chapters prior to our regional housing needs assessment being completed. We are working on those actively right now. In Brentwood, Plastow, Rye, Newton, Hampton, and the Village District of Little Boar's Head, we actively have contracts for Invest New Hampshire Housing Opportunity Grants to work on master plans, planning data, public engagement, other components of those municipalities' housing discussion. We are actively working with them. I've presented at this point to we've presented to 4 of those communities. The others have been scheduled at this point. RPC has staff that is involved in the Exeter Housing Advisory Committee. We are not doing the contracted work that Exeter currently has with the Housing Opportunity Grant through Invest New Hampshire, but we are participants in the conversation that they are having. They are working with a different consultant from the bulk of their work. Portsmouth, Atkinson, East Kingston, Kensington, and Seabrook all also have housing opportunity grants. They are working with different consultants. Portsmouth specifically has their housing navigator, Howard, who's here with us this evening. The other 4 communities are working with their respective consultants to work on predominantly master plan chapters, a few other components in those communities. Of the work that we are doing, it combines the whole gamut of planning and data gathering and public engagement. We're doing housing preference and community surveys. We are doing local data needs assessments because our regional housing needs assessment only could dive so far into each municipality's data. We are doing a deeper dive with predominantly some of the tax assessing data, but other sources in those communities. We are doing build out analysis in a few of our communities. We are doing public information and engagement sessions with every single HOP grant that we are actively working on. We are doing master plan updates or supplemental documents to master plans if they were recently updated. We are doing land use regulation audits to identify barriers and opportunities to housing. Some barriers are good, some opportunities are not the right fit for each community. So we are looking at the gamut to try and come up with the best fit for those communities in their place. We are also developing land use regulations, specifically with the Village District of Little Boar's Head. I'm helping them to adopt site plan regulations for the first time. They simply don't have any. So we're not only trying to advance housing, we're trying to advance planning in our communities to the degree that we can under this opportunity. The last thing we are also helping our communities do is apply for more HOP grants. There are still a couple of phases of the housing opportunity grants that are able to be applied for. Those include land use regulation audits and actually developing land use regulations and doing public engagements and documentation underneath those grants. So if you are interested and you are not currently on our list, or you want to do more with a HOP grant because you are on our list, please come talk to me. There is still time. We really would like to get as much advancement on housing and planning in our communities that we can. We've never seen this kind of investment on the state with, there's no match required to this. It requires you to have a commitment to explore housing opportunity and have conversation in your communities. It does not commit you to making any change your residents or your planning board is not ready to take. It makes you have the conversation. So please contact me. And now I'll get off my soapbox.
I'm gonna hop on the soapbox just because as we'll get everybody up here and I'll get the technology working for all the presentations. But you know, for some of us that have been around, we've seen a lot of regional housing needs assessments come and go. And inevitably the focus has been on the fair share and, you know, bring up the fair share and communities immediately put up the walls. No one wants to talk about it. And I don't blame you. So this time, and I think this document and this effort has changed that conversation and it's opened up the doors to really try and think about what we can do as communities and as a region collaboratively. You know, we'll take a look through that assessment. It's on our website. Take some time to look through it. We even looked at, made an attempt at least to look at, well, what about water, sewer, and infrastructure? What does that mean? How does that fit into the picture? There's so many aspects to, you know, how we develop housing. It's not just spreading it across the region in some formulaic fair share. We got to think about it differently. And that's part of the reason why we're doing this tonight. This is probably our third or fourth conversation on housing this year. And for those that aren't our regular commissioners, thank you for coming. Really appreciate having some outside folks. And I love these commissioners, but you know, they're the choir for us, right? So it's good to have you here and get you to see some of the work that's being done. So with that, what I'll do is bring our panelists up. Going to fumble through getting the right slideshow up at the same time, and then I'll just introduce everybody and we'll get rolling. So there's some snacks over there if this takes me longer than it should. And we'll try to get things rolling here. You can talk amongst yourself while you get this to work.
You have snacks and I'm
If
not
you wanna
there.
come help me, that'd be fine by me. No, okay, I want to get first one. I'm going to do GSD,
Okay.
and then I'm going to bring up this one and then that one. And I just got to get them up. Like, I don't know if they all want to be running them.
We can't run them all. At the same
Yeah,
time.
we just run, so do the GSD one, I guess, and share it to the screen. All right. Look at that.
I gotta project to Zoom.
All right, Zoom folks, we're going to share the screen again. Hopefully you can hear me okay. So if I can get my panelists to come up, come on, guys, I'll introduce you guys once you get up here. And I'm hoping you guys can advance your own slides.
That really did help.
All right. I'm gonna have you guys just up the panel. I mean, you guys go first. The slides will be up and then switch it over to Brandon. Cool. All right. So come on up. So first up, I have John and Maggie Randolph, with Harmony Homes GSD community. Has anyone not heard of these guys?
That's terrifying.
And that's- John is the owner of GSD Communities, which includes Harmony Homes, assisted living and memory care in Durham, community hospice and GSD construction. As a 22-year Air Force veteran, John has always had a passion for serving others. John's dedication to providing high quality, affordable housing and caring for people is the foundation of his leadership approach. John holds a Master of Arts in Government from Harvard University, and a Master's of Arts in Educational Leadership from the University of Colorado Springs, and a Master's of Arts in Military Leadership from Air University. Maggie Randolph is the owner of GSD Studios, an architect and planning firm with a focus on community sustainability and the concept of home. She's a registered architect in the state of New Hampshire, holds an NCARB certificate, which I probably should have asked you what that meant, but I didn't. Is a member of the American Institute of Architects, a lead accredited professional in neighborhood development. Maggie holds a Bachelor of Architecture from the University of Miami with a concentration in urban planning and has over 15 years experience in design, inspection, administration, and project management for residential, commercial, and government projects. They're still getting that up. So I'm going to introduce our second presenter while we're here. Regan LeMay is a volunteer with the Manchester Housing Alliance. He's a Manchester native. And the Housing Alliance has formed the Manchester Housing Alliance Land Trust, which is a newly formed 501c3 to develop and maintain stable and affordable, equitable, and diverse housing opportunities in perpetuity for low, moderate income residents of the Manchester area. This should be a really interesting presentation for a different approach to housing. And then this last guy, I'm going to embarrass a little because when I worked in Nashua, James was this kid that would show up at all the NRPC meetings and demand that the train from Boston to Nashua get, implemented and advocated for sidewalks. And I was like, man, this kid is a pain. But you look at him now.
Still there.
So now James is the Senior Vice President of Planning and Development for MPACP Collective, a real estate development group with expertise in form-based zoning and property entitlement. He's an experienced community developer now, the project manager and certified planner with a bachelor's in architecture and a master's degree in community development policy from UNH. Prior to joining the MPACP Collective, James worked as a project manager for Southern New Hampshire Planning Commission and Sylvia Valhalla over there. And he was a downtown specialist for the Economic Development Division of Nashua under the mayor's office, and before that, he just harassed me at Nashua Regional Planning Commission. Pretty much summed it up. So with that, we get the slides up, and you guys can just have a seat, and I'll. You can stand if you want. Yeah.
But
You want me to turn sides or?
All
right.
Other slides.
Excellent.
Good evening, everybody. How's everybody doing tonight? Anybody got a recent college or high school graduate still living with them at home? Okay, I've got a couple of hands. I got a 20-year-old that just came back and everything else. You've got one. It's absolutely amazing how many recent high school and college graduates are struggling to find housing. But we have at Harmony Homes, I have about 90 employees that take care of 80 seniors every single day. And I have to look them in the eye every single day. And when we started talking to them a while ago about what their constraints were, what their challenges were, and everything else, we heard affordable housing within driving distance of where we work, and childcare. Those are the two things that we kept hearing over and over again. We try to provide affordable housing to our seniors, so raising the prices on senior care wasn't an option. So we were kind of pinned in between keeping those prices affordable for our senior care and paying our staff as best we could. And Maggie and I sat down at that point and kind of started to rack our brains, and we went to the town of Durham and we asked for permission to build the building that you see here, and Maggie's going to talk about it in just a second. And give you a little bit of details about it, but the town of Durham allowed us to build this with every possible setback in the world. That's about as big a building as you could possibly make. Like I said, Maggie's going to give you some details, but on the business side of it, we lease this to our staff for 30% of their pay or to a part-time person for 16 hours. So we have people that live in this building with a 1-bedroom, 650 to 800, 850. And you can see in the distance, the building that they walk to work to. This building also has childcare in it, so they go downstairs, drop their children off. If they live somewhere else, they can also use the childcare. And there's only one bad thing about living here is you cannot be late to work. I accept no excuses for being late to work 600 feet away. If you run out of gas, got a flat tire, walk it, and stuff like that. In fact, I don't want you to drive it, but Maggie designed this building and she's going to give you a little bit of specifics on it and kind of talk to you about another project we're doing. So can you?
Sounds good. So this is Harmony Place. Like you said, you can see Harmony Homes Assisted Living is in the background. It is on the campus of Harmony Homes in Durham, right off of Route 4. As John was saying, this is designed, again, with every setback because it's surrounded on 3 sides by water. But it's designed to have 7 one-bedroom apartments in it, a childcare and office and training space for administration staff. So I'll give you a quick walkthrough through what we've been doing. And so this was our first venture into affordable housing. And obviously we know where we're going after this, but pretty simple design. Like I said, 1-bedroom units. They're just about 500 square feet, just to give you an idea about the size of them. This, training center actually is now the residence of the owner of the childcare, which we'll get into. So she has a very long walk to work as well. And then again, the other residences, 2nd floor, same thing. 3rd floor is staff offices, and this is their terrible view. So we have to deal with a lot of, sun blindness, workman's comp, issues. But you can see, that's a drone shot from the grand opening where you can see just how close they are to the rest of the campus. Give you some quick shots about the kind of, the quality and what these look like inside. You can see we've got a combination, kitchen, the living room is right back here. If you walk through a door right here, you'll come into the bedroom. And then those are connected through with the kind of a simple, a bathroom there, but they've also got washer dryers in them. So that's a really nice thing. And we actually, when we had a resident move in recently, I can't tell you, he started crying because he's moving out of an RV into, one of these units. And he literally started crying. He was like, I've never had a washer or dryer. And the things that we take for granted, this is a big moment for him. Also on the 1st floor, you can see we have a childcare, and I get to embarrass John with this slide. So this is my favorite part. Because there he is just kind of helping take care of the kids for about an hour there. And he makes a really good elephant. So that's him on the floor there. But we got playground space outside. The kids, they go outside every day. But they also, we could talk about this too, but it's a really great way. It's not only supportive to our staff because staff can come and nurse if they need to, or they can come and have lunch with the kids, but the kids also get to interact with our seniors. And so they get to do a lot of the same activities and come together. And so it keeps our seniors young and active as well. Great for the kids, great for the seniors, great for the parents, great for us too, because it helps stabilize our staff and, providing a benefit. So
And
that's
the staff that are living in this building are saving about $700 to $900 a month in childcare and housing, never mind gas costs, commuting costs and everything else. And we're trying to train them to save and invest that and prepare, but some of them ask to reduce their hours actually. So.
This is a franchise location of a place to grow out of Brentwood. So the owner actually is a young woman in her, early 20s. She was a childcare worker and now she's a business owner. So this is her business. Again, she lives right next door. So it's a really great benefit to be able to offer our staff.
So when we were building this, one of the reasons we built it though is we were hearing stories of people driving from Milton all the way to South Berwick, Maine to drop their kids off with grandparents and then driving to Durham, working an 8 to 10 hour day, taking care of our seniors and then doing the opposite trip back. So it was working a 12 to 14-hour day, travel time, expenses, family and everything else. And we're asking them to take great care of our seniors. How can we do that without taking great care of them? And really, that was kind of the mentality that drove this facility and everything else.
So needless to say, this building is full and we have a wait list. So that kind of propelled us to go to the next project. So enter in the cottages at Back River Road, which I know has gotten a lot of attention recently. So we'll just get right into it. So Cottages Back River Road we have 44 tiny homes that we're building and they will all be remain at affordable housing prices. So the fair market rental rate is what we agreed to with the community. But pocket neighborhoods are not, an unknown thing. They're very popular out west with the work of Ross Chapin. So they had a little harder time coming back east, but this is a very old typology that we're just, on board to help bring it back. And you can see a rendering of one of the clusters there.
I think it's important to bring up that the reason why we showed you the first building is it fit the demographics of where we were building, the setbacks and et cetera, it fit, everything else. We're not a big apartment building complex kind of person. We like the tiny home complex a little bit more. But when we went to Dover and talked to them, we wanted this project to fit into the neighborhood. The color of the housing, everything matched the surroundings. And so we worked really hard to match that into the community.
So then I want to step back just a minute. So how, as John was saying, how the heck did we get to this design? Because I think that's what we get a lot of questions about. Dover has a really interesting zoning program, the Transfer of Development Rights, TDR. I know I'm speaking all of your language, so I won't go into what that is. But this is how we were able to buy the density to make this project work. And in Dover, if you have an affordable housing, if you agree to a certain square footage and to cap at the fair market rental rates, then it remains, and that density fee that you're paying is waived. And so that helps make this project remain affordable and that we can actually afford to build it as such. But how do we come by the design? So I want to step back to the transect for a minute. My background, is heavily into new urbanism. So I'm sure that, again, this is a useful tool to many. But just looking at the sequence of how we look at our land and how we see the sequence of our neighborhoods. So this is examples from around our state. So we go, just down and dirty, here we go. Natural zone, rural zone, suburban, general urban, urban center, and then urban core. So natural zone, obviously, we've got so much of that, and it's so beautiful here. And it's one of the things that makes us the top 5, in the country. I mean, talking about the environment of where we want to be, but there's really not much going on as far as dwelling units. Into the rural zone, we've got, farms. This is actually a Google Earth shot of the town that I grew up in central New Hampshire. You're not walking anywhere. You're going to drive everywhere, but it's, it definitely serves its purpose, and it's, makes up a lot of our state. And then we get into the suburban zone. We're a lot more familiar with this. This is, kind of in the surrounding Exeter Stratham area. This is a Google Earth shot of Stratham. So you can see this is where we tend to get the larger plots of land, right? We tend to, in a lot of areas, get, cul-de-sacs and into that sort of neighborhood development. But again, it's very car centric. You're really not going to be walking a lot of places. You're driving to grocery stores, you're driving back. But we tend to be used to this, right? You've got probably 2-acre, lot sizes, large, frontages, setbacks are deep. And you can see again, how, with the transect here, how far back you have to be. Sidewalks are pretty minimal, not really defined street trees, it's again, in that gap somewhere. Then we get into general urban. So this is looking a section of downtown Exeter that get absolutely slammed during Halloween because of just what a great neighborhood. The kids are all safe in there. And then you can kind of see Google Earth. This is also that same kind of area. You can see again, talking more dense in this area. And again, you're talking about the lots are a lot smaller. Setbacks are not as deep. You get sidewalks, your street, your streets are becoming more defined. So, like I said, sidewalks, you get, you start to get granite curbing in potentially. And so a lot of these, the definition comes into play. Urban center core, we're all familiar with Market Street and Portsmouth, kind of a similar area. Again, you're seeing the densification of it. And then you'll get retail shops and galleries, offices. We start to get that mixed use in here. And then urban core, I brought up Manchester. We don't have a lot of the tall building areas where you get civic pride, parades and festivals and everything, but we do have a little bit. And again, we talk about that density. So the cool part about this is that the transect really is meant to be just a gradual spectrum from, no density essentially into the greatest amount of density. And so to look at New Hampshire and look at the context in which we're standing to say, all right, where do I want to be and what is appropriate to build and how do we thoughtfully create more density? This is, I think, what people are scared of, and I get it. Right? We've got our detached single-family homes. This might be even more dense than we're often used to. And the fear is that if we want to build dense, densely next to it, it's going to be an apartment building surrounded by a sea of parking. And it's not going to fit in. And we're going to have those people living here. We got a lot of that with Back River Road. And so how can we make this more palatable? How can we make it more friendly? Because this is a really odd neighborhood. And I can see and understand why somebody would fight this when coming into, planning boards and future projects. But there are other ways of doing it. This is the missing middle. We are familiar with these terms. These aren't things that are unknown. As we know, we've seen these, these graphics before. This is from Opticos Design. And so how can we start to infill that progression of density? So we're talking about duplexes, triplexes, fourplexes, courtyard apartments, bungalow courts. Big fan of that one. Townhomes, multiplexes, live works, all of these can create, like I said, that spectrum of density. And how can we thoughtfully do this? I know we talked a lot about demographics of our state, and John has some really interesting, thought, we know where we are, and the housing needs assessment does hit on this. See, I did read parts of it. I did skim a little bit more. But we know where our state is heading. You want to talk about the
Well, we know
65
that
over.
there's about 150,000 people over age 65 in the state right now. We're heading to 600,000 in the next, decade and a half. That's going to dramatically change the demographics of our state. And how's that going to impact the housing, all the challenges that go along with that?
And so, and it's going to be really interesting of how our state changes, but we talked about baby boomers, this is, who's looking for single family homes, 71%. And so we talk about the number of people in our state that are in this age range. I mean, I know it's changing a little bit. But single family is what we've all been grown up that this is what we want, right? I want the American dream. I get my white picket fence. I get my 5+ acres. My parents live on 13 acres and you can't see anybody around them. That is what they wanted and that's what they have. But it's going to be interesting how our state transitions out of this and how we grow. Again, thoughtfully is the key here. But number of baby boomers, very few are looking for townhomes, condos, multifamily, and mobile homes. It will be interesting as this population ages and how we age in place, because we're finding that the boomers, are looking for the same type of things that the Gen Z and millennials are looking for. Walkability, neighborhoods, things where they can age in place gracefully, knowing that I can rely on my neighbor because he's aware that I might not, come out. If I haven't come out in a couple of days, maybe he's got to check that I've, twisted my ankle on stupid heels or something. So things like that. But the millennials, again, the ages, we're all kind of hitting 40 now. So it's, it's a little bit dated, but again, the drastic change in the type of housing that we're looking for. 39% looking for single family, 59% looking for missing middle housing. This is where we want to raise our kids. It's different now. It has changed. And so as we grow with the demographics of our state, as we recognize who we want to keep here, who we want to attract, we have to consider the type of housing that other generations are looking for.
I think the point that I'd like to hit on that though real quick is we look around some of our planning boards and you look at the people that are doing it. Look at everybody in this room and everything else. When's the last time you talked to a 22-year-old about what they saw in housing and what they want in housing? It's different than what we want in this room. I own 25 Benjamin here in Stratham a few years ago. That was my dream, was to own 3 acres in Stratham, 4,000 square feet, all everything else. And I eventually sold it because it was too much to maintain, too much to do and everything else and stuff and downsize. We're amazed that 44 tiny homes, we have 80+ names. And we thought they were all going to be 18 to 25-year-olds. We're finding a lot of 55 and over that just want simple. They just want to get out of, a big house and everything else. The other thing that we're working through and we had to work through in this project was we literally went driveway by driveway and met our neighbors and told them who we were, told them who was going to live here because they did this thing. Well, those people need services. The one thing that we need to be very, very clear when we're out there talking about this is these are people are making $15 to $25 an hour, $40,000 to $45,000 a year. They're taking care of your mother, they're taking care of your children, they're cooking for you, they're fixing your car, they're serving you in your community right now. They're firefighters, they're police officers. They should be able to live in the town they work in. They should be able to live near to where they work. and everything else. And that's something that we believe very strongly. The project that we're showing you right now is about 4 miles from our second facility. It's the closest we could get to. We also plan to park a company vehicle there so they can come in by shift in a company vehicle if they want to. But there's also a very strong sense of community. They want to feel a strong sense of community. That's why Maggie designed these in clusters of 13. And last thing I think we're bringing together here real quick is we bought 8 acres. We're building on 4 acres. We put 4 acres into conservation, but this was the approved plan that we bought, 9 single-family homes. So we could have come in as a builder and built 9 single-family homes, made $100,000 piece and walked away and been just fine. We went back to Dover and asked to use their TDR program, and then they changed the 9 building housing lots into this.
This is what we're now doing at the cottages at Back River Road. And so you can see, we've gone to tiny homes, which have a square foot footprint of 384 square feet. So they are 16 by 24, and they do have a loft. So that brings them to a total of about 540 square feet each. But you can see that this is how we've arranged them. So we've arranged them in that pocket neighborhood setting, that cottage court, the bungalow court kind of set up, because we wanted to capitalize in the community. We wanted to bring those elements that, you know, our staff is telling us that they want to hear. I want porches. I want to know my neighbors. I want a safe place that if I have a child, they can go outside and play and we know who's there. So we're really excited, you know, as the construction is underway, you know, how these have developed. But again, you can see that all this parking is along the street. We've got a parking area that also serves as the fire department turnaround. And I want to bring up that for a second, because I cannot speak enough about how much of a willing partner Dover was in this. So this program or this project received 1 variance from the zoning, and that was for some additional parking that went into a setback just a little bit. And so that was at the request to get a little bit more. These have parking requirements for these. They're 1-bedroom apartment units technically, although they have 1.5 bedrooms, but they only have, we have 1 point something parking spaces per unit. So that's something that's, it was definitely something we worked with on the land constraint of this. But, you know, that's something that they were really interested in. Again, as John mentioned, that, you know, as we have ride shares and if other companies end up coming in and, you know, they had multiple employees living here, they also could provide a van. And so how can we do things, you know, smart? We're also not that far from transit. So it's a walkable distance to a transit spot. But the transit was a bonus. Again, we're talking about how can we create, you know, ways to improve this. So like I said, common greens here, every unit has a porch. You'll park along the street or the parking lot and then be able to walk in towards your unit.
Me in there. I just want to see if people have questions on Zoom. Can you see that?
I can't see it here.
Oh, never mind. That's fine.
Someone smarter than I know how to do this.
Sarah, maybe do that. I just want to make sure if there's questions on Zoom that people can actually. I see them and not. Where is my? There we go. There we go. I have too many monitors at my office, and my staff makes fun of me for it. And sorry.
Good. Just some, you know, renderings and some, you know, from the model of what we're trying to accomplish here. So you can see the common greens, the way these are kind of, you know, situated. You can see the porches coming in, sidewalks. These will all have landscaping plans and, you know, and lighting in each of the clusters. But it really is meant to turn its back on the car. We want to focus on the people that are living here. And what I love about pocket neighborhoods, again, is that, you know, when you're in the space, you know, that porch is really vital. The center space is public. The porch is semi-private, semi-public. And then you come, you know, retreat into the private. Unlike, you know, the typology that we've been used to for so long, where you drive down your street, you pull into your garage, you enter your house and you escape to your backyard. You don't see anybody. So it's a different way of looking at things. Just looking at a quick floor plan about how big these are. This has evolved slightly, but the concept remains the same. Again, 16 by 24. We picked those sizes because they are the size of sheathing. They are 12 feet to the eaves. That's a stud length. They are, you know, 16 feet underneath to support the ridge, stud-like. So we're trying to be, because this is affordable housing and because our budgets are what they are, because we are personally financing this project, we're trying to capitalize as much, on efficiency and minimizing waste as much as possible. And if you want to, okay. He's really good at that part. So again, you're talking about, a combination kitchen living, you've got one bedroom, and you have a combination, you get the bathroom, also with washer dryer hookups in there. We have evolved these to have a set of tiny home stairs that lead up to a loft that would be over this entire section. So tiny home code is different. So you don't have the stairs are a little steeper and narrower. So which is why it's important to have, maintain a bedroom on the first floor again, to maximize the number of people that can live in. These are a little dated now, but you can see the spray foam is going up. You can see those tiny home stairs. Sheetrock is definitely underway. And then again, these are taken about a month ago now, but kind of how this first cluster is looking. And that's the end of that. So I didn't know if you wanted to. Oh, yeah. Okay,
I was gonna do questions, but yeah, I think that makes sense. We just try to.
perfect. I'll get out of the way.
Thank you, guys. Next up is Brandon with the Manchester Alliance. I'm gonna have to switch the presentation for you. Yeah. And I want to make sure also that this is actually sharing. I could. All right, well, hopefully that's working on Zoom. Okay. What did I just do? Yeah, there you go. All right, I will let you have at it.
All right, thank you very much. Hey, everybody, my name is Brandon LeMay, and I am with the Manchester Housing Alliance Land Trust. We are a newly incorporated 501c3 as of last month. And we are just concerned residents of Manchester who have gotten together for a people-powered solution around housing, to really put it simply. So a little bit behind us, or a little bit about us, is that we started off as the Manchester Housing Alliance. So we were basically trying to think about what problems were being faced by the typical Manchester resident. And part of our origin was with Rights and Democracy. And at the time, our membership really struggled with affordable housing. And this was a few years before it was even really, I think, on like the minds of folks as a main problem to this economy here. So we originally started off as an advocacy group. We pushed Mayor Craig to do an affordable housing task force. 2 of our members served on that task force and also advocated for the creation of the Manchester Housing Commission. Housing commissions are a really interesting tool that municipalities can use and have a lot of powers to be gifted property or to be able to basically just manage assets to help out with local affordable housing developments. They can do a lot more than that, but that'd be a whole nother presentation here. So just some of the principles that have guided us here is that everyone deserves housing. It should be a human right. The private for-profit market and the government are failing to provide affordable housing. And the landlord-tenant dynamic is a little paternalistic and exploitative, especially when the market is as tight as it is right now. So we still feel that low and middle income people should be paying their own mortgages and not the mortgages of some out-of-state landlord. And we believe that we are preserving wealth and keeping it within the community by starting a community land trust. So we like to think of a lot of different solutions around housing. We like to say at the Manchester Housing Alliance that the housing crisis is going to require a tapestry of solutions. And if somebody says that they have the silver bullet for you for housing, they're lying. And I'd be lying to you if I said that community land trusts are going to solve all of our problems around housing. But rather, it is just a good solution. So we just started talking to housing organizers or people just interested in housing from all across the country. And we found an organizer from Push Buffalo who was involved with the establishment of the Fruit Belt Community Land Trust in Buffalo. So a little story about Buffalo is, so Buffalo is a bit like Manchester, a lot of differences, but hear me out. So basically, these are two industrial cities that saw their decay of that industry occur in the early 20th century. And from then there was economic decline, but then a resurgence, especially lately. Both Manchester and Buffalo have an influx of tech companies moving in. And so there's a lot of opportunity for real estate developments to come in and to be able to profit pretty well off of that. So what happened here, though, specifically with the Fruit Belt Land Trust, was we had the Buffalo Niagara Medical Campus that was next to this neighborhood called the Fruit Belt. And this was an historically Black and German working class neighborhood. And as we've mentioned here, one of our previous presenters is that people really like walking to work, right? That's a really good benefit. So what happens when you have high paying jobs from a medical campus that are opening up in a low income neighborhood? What happens is the people originally in that neighborhood are displaced. And then people that work at the hospital are then paying more in rents or in mortgages, and then contributes to the cycle of unaffordability in that city. So one thing I really want to emphasize here is that land trusts are good at preserving affordable housing. And that's really our main goal here, is to say, hey, this is a neighborhood or a building or whatever, and saying this perpetually will remain affordable to those who work here in the city. So this was a very grassroots effort, and it started off with just housing organizers going door to door and asking tenants about how they're feeling about their rents going up and about what kind of solutions that they would like. And eventually they formed the Fruit Belt Land Trust, and they now have, I forget, it's hundreds of properties in Buffalo now, with more on the way potentially. But essentially, it's a pretty simple model. It's really what a lot of landlords do, right? You acquire property, you develop housing, gardens. They also do commercial spaces too in Buffalo. Community land trusts are very flexible. You can just focus on just housing. You can do, if you wanted to, just commercial. I don't know why you'd want to do that. Or most commonly, land trusts around here have been used to preserve the environment. And this is just a creative solution to preserve affordable housing instead. So obviously, for being a nonprofit, you can acquire property with the help of grants. We're going to be doing a mixture of grants. We're going to see what kind of help we can get from the city, private donations. We're setting up our trust to have public meetings so we can take HUD grants as well, potentially. So there's a lot of funding that you can try to divert into community land trusts, and you can tailor that to each individual land trust themselves. So this is my graphic design attempt here. I'm not a graphic designer, I'm sorry. But essentially, it's super simple. This picture right here explains what our community land trust will do. So the land trust just owns the land. That's it, right? And what the land trust does is it leases that land to an entity that owns the building. So in our case, we want to lease our buildings to cooperatives. And these are what we're calling, or what's called limited equity co-ops. So this means that tenants actually own the buildings. And they're not tenants anymore, actually, they're residents. The residents own the buildings that they are living in. And so what can happen here is the land trust can lease a 99-year lease. We hate forever leases in our property rights laws, I've been learning. And so that means that you can lease to this co-op for 99 years, and you can put on stipulations to whatever your needs are. You can say, hey, you can only have co-ops on this land. You can do rentals, but it has to be a certain percentage of the area median income. There's a lot of flexibility. And one thing that we're kind of trying to contemplate ourselves as a land trust is, do we want to have all limited equity co-ops? Do we want to have some affordable rentals? Because maybe not everyone wants to be the owner of their unit too, but we do need to have cheap rentals as well. So I do want to state that there is a downside to land trusts, and we've talked to various land trusts around the country. And what tends to be the problem is that, well, the problem is that units are a very low barrier to entry in terms of costs. So instead of, there are myths about how much you need for a down payment for a house, but usually you think like 10%. In reality, you can do a lot less. So instead of thinking like tens of thousands of dollars, a buying a share of this land trust would cost maybe thousands of dollars with opportunities to help finance buying a share if you meet a certain income threshold. But the problem is that you are bound by how much you can potentially sell that unit for after a certain amount of time. So if you buy let's just say like an apartment unit, 3rd floor, $100,000 in 2025, and you see property values skyrocket over the years, well, we could put a clause in that lease that if you do sell eventually, that you can only profit X%. So the barrier to entry is higher, but you also can't sell out for a higher price as well too. So people tend to get very confused. Sometimes you have to explain that in new community land trusts that, hey, you're getting a part of this share for cheap, but also you're not going to be able to sell it for very much either. All right, so specifically why a land trust? Because there are a lot of great, private, not-for-profit, nonprofit housing organizations. So we wanted to be really conscious about what kind of niche that we're filling here. And we looked at what other organizations are doing, particularly in Manchester. NeighborWorks is a great example. They're providing some great affordable housing to the community. And we feel like the Community Land Trust would actually be filling a niche that they and other organizations are not filling. We don't want to duplicate our results. And we think that NeighborWorks, and again, I don't know why I decided to single out NeighborWorks here, but other organizations do provide good quality low-income units. But we feel like this, and actually from our previous presenters, is actually providing more opportunities in that middle housing sector. We are going to be targeting multifamily homes, particularly in low-income neighborhoods in Manchester. And we want to make sure that those are perpetually affordable to people working in the areas. And another thing too about land trusts is that the residents get to actually vote on what's happening to their properties. So I always like to use the parable of, if you're a renter in a traditional unit and the landlord's landscaper, weed whacks your daylilies, right? What can you really do? You can kind of complain to your landlord a little bit, but you don't have a lot of power as a tenant. Whereas tenants in a community or residents in a community land trust could then vote on things like contracts on who gets to mow the lawn. Do we hire somebody to mow the lawn, or do we all pitch in and mow it together? Those are things that the residents themselves get to decide. They have the power, and we think that's how it should be. So one thing I really want to emphasize is that community land trusts can work anywhere. So they were they were first enacted in the South in the 60s. Particularly to preserve affordable housing for Black tenants specifically. We've also seen it being adapted in places like DC. There was a cooperative that we talked to back in the 70s that was focused on providing housing for activists in DC. And they found that because people actually had a sense of community and they knew each other, people were more likely to pay their rent or their mortgages on time because there's actually a community growing there. And if you're not paying your mortgage, well, then you're potentially risking everyone else's housing too. So another thing that makes us really flexible is that these can be owned or funded privately, publicly, however you want it to happen. We're going privately, hopefully with some public funding as well. But again, there's also a lot of variation in what kinds of lots or buildings that you could do. So for instance, our community land trust is going to focus a lot on multifamily homes. The Fruit Belt Land Trust focus a lot on single family homes. So if multifamily homes don't make sense for your city or town, then you don't have to have that be the focus of your land trust. It can cater to what your community actually needs. So that's the end of it. I know we're going to do questions towards the end, so I can skip that. So
Maybe if you can switch the screen, we'll get started.
Right, yeah, dive right in and I'll get you a screen.
My name is James Feo. I recently completed some research on behalf of New Hampshire Housing around policy and program models for production of accessory dwelling units and looking at how that can apply to New Hampshire. This project was actually started and conducted through Southern New Hampshire Planning Commission. And I'd just like to take a minute to acknowledge Sylvia Von Aulich, who helped sort of editorialize my work and keep me on track and create the opportunity for me to speak here today. So thank you. Happy to be here and happy to talk about this subject. I'll keep it pretty brief, but just want to talk a little bit about what the goal of this project was. Like the title says, the project really looks at programs and policies implemented in other locations in the United States, and how they encourage the support and encouraged and supported the creation of accessory dwelling units within their communities. The second part of this research really was looking at how to identify these tools and techniques that were deployed by these case studies in an agnostic way and sort of distill them down into their analytical or technical components and list them out so that communities in New Hampshire can look at those tools in a sort of a clear-eyed way and determine whether any of those tools make sense for them to implement. The case studies include 9 different locations across 3 areas of focus when we started the work. And so the areas of focus are affordability. Another way to think of this is like subsidy or financial tools to help facilitate ADUs. And that breaks down further into ADU construction or rental assistance based on income qualifications. The second area is pre-approved plans for ADUs, and the third is design initiatives. And in the pre-approved plans, we'll look at in each of these, we'll look at a single case study that is specific to a municipal level of intervention. So some of these other ones have state level intervention or community organizations that sort of became involved in the process of creating ADUs. But since this is a municipal official forum, we'll focus on the municipal response. Just real quick on the affordable one, I'll go through the 3 case studies and just differentiate a little between the 3. So the first one, Barnstable, is Barnstable, Mass. is essentially like the lower half of Cape Cod. If you're not familiar with the area, and they developed a loan program that was designed to give amnesty to informal accessory dwelling units that already existed in a location that was experiencing some pretty serious problems with affordability. And the loan program was pretty effective. This program is a legacy program. It's been around for over 20 years, and they have put over 200 ADUs on their books through that program. So it's pretty successful, and we'll take a little closer look at that. The next one is Boston, which has a relatively brand new program, and their loan program was really designed to supplement and support a piloted change in their zoning, where they look to make ADUs a by right process. And Boston's kind of novel too, because their term ADU is very different than what we think of, right? Like we think of an ADU as an addition or a component of your single family home. Boston doesn't have a ton of single family homes. They have walk-ups. So an ADU actually in that instance is being the attic or basement of a 3-unit flat. So a lot of diversity in the types of case studies and the kind of environments where these things can happen. And then the last one under affordability was California. And California had a grant program that would pay for pre-construction costs. And so their whole thing was to get over the risks that maybe a low cash household would have with getting to financing. So those things are all in the report. I see some of you grabbed them. We've given away all of them. So if you don't have one, I apologize, but there is a 1-page flyer on the back table. And on that flyer, there's a little QR code, which is a quick link to New Hampshire Housing's webpage, where you can find the digital version of the report. The other thing that's really nice about the flyers on the backside, there's a little cheat sheet. And the cheat sheet shows all the case studies across the top, and the tools, they identified tools they implemented across the side. So that's something that might be useful to take a look at. Barnstable, Mass, as I mentioned, the amnesty program had a goal of providing an opportunity to bring into compliance many of the currently unpermitted accessory apartments and units in the town. Also to allow construction of affordable housing. And so the way they did this through the loan program was to create eligibility around establishing a permit for that non-compliant unit. And in exchange for getting a 0 interest deferred loan, basically the loan you don't pay back until you sell your home, they just had to agree to income restrict the rental unit, which in many cases in this environment was probably an underlying condition anyways, because they had tenants that were living in a small unit in the back of their property and probably doing working class work in the town of Barnstable. One of the ways the town controlled this is through contract. And the contract basically said you need to, on an annual basis, monitor your income of your tenant and report that to us. And you have to send us a copy of the lease that you have with your tenant, because they didn't want people having 2 months leases in the middle of the summer when Barnstable goes from, X thousand people to over 150,000 people. And then the one other thing they required in terms of monitoring is that rent be fair and open. So basically you advertise the unit and you don't private lease, make a selection. They, in exchange, the loan amount could be used for any kind of code compliance that the building needed to be get up to reaching a certificate of occupancy. So let's take a look at pre-approved plans. Here, there's 3 different instances: Eugene, Oregon, Chico, California, and Seattle, Washington. And all 3 of them kind of have a different flavor in how they approach pre-approved plans. We're going to just look at Eugene because of the time limitation here. But I highly encourage checking out Seattle's project if you have time. It's a little bigger, it's a little more complex, and maybe a lot of your municipalities are able to achieve, but it's very inspirational and might motivate you to want to go and try to do a program in your town. So please check it out. The reason I like to bring up Eugene for this sort of municipal focus is they actually had a staff person on staff in their planning department, in their engineering department, planning and engineering, that was able to develop the set of plans and stamp the plans all in-house. And so that was really useful, right? Like they didn't have to pay a consultant. They didn't have to put together a complex process to get to a place where they approved plans. They were able to collaborate internally to get it done. And so, maybe your town has someone like this that's capable of doing this, or maybe your town knows a person that can collaborate with the planning staff to do something like this on a low budget. And I think that was the part I wanted to bring about this. So that's why we picked Eugene, but I still haven't explained really what a pre-approved plan is. So let me do that. A pre-approved plan is essentially kind of like Brandon was talking about the land versus the house. It is just the house part of the building. All the components that are reviewed and kept on file and stamped by the planning department. And so it saves time and expense for the property owner and for the planning department because they don't have to review the architectural components of a permitted project. They just have to make sure that how that footprint of that building that's stamped fits on the site, meets the requirements. And that's, zoning requirements, but also things like infrastructure connections and topography resolution, things like that. But it's a really good way to cut down on the caseload for staff, especially if a town starts ramping up and building these things, right? Like maybe they're going to build 100 or 200 of these in the next 4 or 5 years. That could be a real burden to planning staff. They might have some real angst about that if they follow a traditional review process. Something like this might be able to take sort of the review capacity of 1 staff and turn it into the review capacity of 3 staff. So it's really useful in that way. It's a functional tool. One of the things that has changed in Eugene is they learned from Seattle in that it's great to have pre-approved plans from a functionality standpoint, but what you really need to do is use this tool, this pre-approved plan, as a way to inspire homeowners to get involved and try to do something like this. And so what they did is they evolved their program from having this one unit that was pre-approved through an internal staff person to doing a solicitation process where they went out and asked local architects and engineers to submit a plan. And in return, that plan would be pre-approved and posted on the city's webpage. And it gets even better. So what ends up happening is the municipality here becomes an intermediary between the architect and the homeowner, where the town is not controlling or managing these plans. The architect retains intellectual ownership and intellectual property of the plans. And for a very small fee, like $1,200, $800, this plan gets licensed to a homeowner to go and build the pre-approved plan set that's available. And architects love this kind of thing because it's a gateway into building a relationship with a potential client, right? Like they might pull those plans and want to go build it and engage with a contractor and realize, oh, really? I don't want to represent myself because I don't know what I'm doing. So I'll hire this architect to be an owner's rep. So the ka-ching, you just got a deal out of that. You got a project. So this is the model that worked very, very well in Seattle. I encourage you to go check out Seattle's model. And so the takeaway from Eugene and pre-approved plans is they saw what worked in Seattle and they copied it. Design initiatives, we'll go really quick through this, but out of the 3, Los Angeles, which was a community-based organization that really got the conversation going on legislation. Houston, which had a planning department that engaged the community in the discussion, and Salt Lake, which had an initiative around addressing housing. We're going to look at Houston, and the reason why is because Houston's planning department played a very active role in establishing a design competition for accessory dwelling units. So maybe in your town, like there's no discussion about ADUs. Maybe people don't know how they feel about ADUs. Maybe the town's divided about ADUs. In that instance, I would highly recommend looking at doing a design competition because it's a risk-free environment in which you can instigate a community discussion about the role accessory dwelling units have to play in providing housing within the context of your local community. And they can be pretty inexpensive to do. And this planning department got a small grant from AARP, a community challenge grant, and they used that grant to award architects. And then they covered the rest of it through staff time, the competition organization, putting them together. And what they did is after they selected the plans and sort of put out a press release, engaged it, they published the plans as a design book on their webpage called Let's Talk Houston. And Let's Talk Houston is run by the planning department. And it became like almost like a blog post where there was a forum discussion about the role ADUs play, about the awardees and the concepts that the design professionals put forward within the competition. So within that resulted, within all of these case studies, we saw sort of these 5 buckets of tools, technical assistance, typically by planning staff, outreach and education, which could be planning staff or it could be community organizations, design initiatives, pre-approved ADU plans, and then financial incentives. And we looked at that. This is part of that cheat sheet I was telling you. It's in the back of the 1-page flyer that was handed out with the MPO stuff. It kind of shows a quick breakdown of how each case study applied those techniques and that thinking. And X's in red are really the focus areas of where we focused our research when we started out in this and discovered that there was a lot more going on. And so what I want to do real quick is just take you through one scenario. This is part of the report that we put together at New Hampshire Housing is scenarios for application New Hampshire. And this is partly based on a real story. So the city of the town of Peterborough, just like the city of Houston, recently applied for an AARP grant to do a design competition for ADUs. And so So they'll get this money and they'll give this as, this is the carrot to get design professionals to submit plans. And they're gonna use this as a launching point for doing this design competition. But what's really clever about what they want to do after this is after they've received the ADU plans, they've done the PR and instigated a community discussion, they want to use the plans that are provided to establish their own pre-approved plan library. So taking that first step of the design competition, translating it into plans that people can pull off of the shelf from the planning department. So a very interesting and interesting way to do it. In the scenario planning, the way we thought about it, well, there's a lot of towns that are too small to facilitate that, or maybe don't have the wherewithal, maybe don't have the community members that are that passionate about the subject that they can do this. So what if we had a regional planning commission do something like this? So the idea is maybe you can get a regional planning entity, the planning commission to solicit the towns, see if they'd be interested in doing a pre-approved plan set. And then working with a subset of the towns within their region to establish a plans library that would then be managed by the RPC. And what's really nice about this is that any given town, if it's too small, couldn't do this on their own, or not effectively, at least when you start to aggregate towns across a whole region, the cost can come way down because you're not duplicating efforts. So. I went way too long, so that is my presentation.
It's there for all of our presenters tonight. Open up for questions and answers, and let me see if I can get the screen straightened out so we can see the Zoom people again. Too many things. So we never hit the share. That was the problem. All right. It's not actually shared. That's what happened. So hold on a sec. Go back to Zoom and you guys can. All right. I'm lost. There they are. And you are fine. And I apologize to the Zoom folks that could not see that, but the slide will be available and this recording will be posted. So. Questions, comments? A couple of people that will start. Was that you? Okay, we gotta start with Tim Moore here in Boston.
When you look at where you're gonna put these tiny housing projects or affordable housing projects, how critical is public transportation access to those projects?
It's not critical. It's a great thing. But like you said, for us as a business, we're going to put, a van there, but, the people that have reached out to us, the public, outside of our own employees, they're going to have their own vehicle. So it's a nice thing. And if, when you can have transit there, then you'll get, a greater number of people that are able to use it, and you can cut down on your parking requirements for the site, but it's not a crucial thing.
I have several questions, but well, I'm going to try and narrow it down really quick. Sewer, water, natural gas for heating and cooking, emergency vehicle access, and how do you maintain affordability into perpetuity? And when someone moves that's supposed to be working in a certain place, do they have to get now a student? When someone changes their job, but they're living in your place, you kick them out.
Okay, the Durham location, we agreed with Durham that it would only be employees, so they have to stay tied to Harmony Homes. That was part of our agreement with Durham. And everything else. In Dover, our employees get first opportunity to move into the Dover location, but it's going to be open to the public. And so there'll be, they could stay there if they leave our employment. And what we did with, in our deed, it's locked in at fair market HUD rate. So it's in our deed that will never change.
And what about sewer, water, natural gas, and emergency vehicle access?
Yep. So I'll answer that backwards. The turnaround that you saw that Maggie displayed is our emergency turnaround in there. So the fire department worked with us for that to be the emergency turnaround. That it worked out really well for them. They were fine with that and everything else. We get the question all the time, and I'm sure a lot of people in this room are interested in the public water and sewer question and everything else. These can be built off from public water and sewer. They can be built on parcels of land, and you could do these on, you need a little bit more land than 4 acres to build 44, but you could build these on septic.
Going around the room, this I'll get to you, Bob, and Lucy.
I'm interested in, the Randolph we were talking about, the units. They're 1 bedroom and yet you have childcare. And in the tiny homes, this same sort of stuff. How do you, I mean, how many people are there actually in a unit? And do you have any limits? I mean, I know when, I live in Stratham and everything's on septic, so, our design is for, so many people in a house. And I realize you're probably on public water and sewer for these, but I mean, there must be some kind of limit on how many people can live there.
So we limit our Durham location to 2 people. So it could be a single parent and a child or a couple. And we allow pets, approved pets, and that would be a 3rd being, and that's the limit. But the only 2 of them can be humans and everything. So that's kind of an important differentiation. The Dover model that we said 1.5 bedrooms, because of the number of spaces that we were doing and everything else. And we'd love to invite any of you to come see either one of the locations. We welcome you to come walk through the location. The design of the, we say 1.5 bedroom, it's got a 160-foot square foot loft. You could easily I can stand up in this loft. You could put a queen size bed up there and you still have a bedroom downstairs. So you could certainly have a young couple, you could certainly have a single parent situation and live comfortably in these. We have people comment, well, I have a bathroom bigger than 384 square feet. You need to get a smaller house or something. But the other part, like we said before, and I'm not going to insult too many people around this room, we got to think like the younger people. I'm sorry, but we've got to think like 25-year-olds. Talk to some 18 to 25-year-olds and ask them what they're looking for in housing and everything else. The other thing we remind people all the time, when we went neighborhood by neighborhood in Dover, we asked them, who's going to buy your $800,000 house if 18 to 25-year-olds don't stay in the state of New Hampshire and everything else? I put this out there all the time. If I was I'm stuck in New Hampshire. How many homes is staying in New Hampshire? But is Sig Sauer, Saffron, Albany, all these companies that are international, are they going to stay in New Hampshire if they can't staff their companies? If we don't build housing, we're not going to keep our people. We're not going to attract people to New Hampshire and everything else. I know a lot of communities aren't excited about the idea, but if we don't do that, where's the tax base going to come from if those companies walk out the door?
So Bob, next, and I'll continue, Tricia.
So first, I want to say I want to visit both the Durham and the Dover location.
Please do.
Second, I want to say, specifically, in Dover, do you have sewage? And if you don't, what percentage of the land has to be assigned to a septic system?
So we are on public water and sewer in Dover. But it's interesting when you look at the DES requirements when we're talking about septic. And there are some really fantastic charts in there about, the type of soil and the slope of the land and everything. And I'm already putting myself to sleep. So here we are. But it's really interesting, it's a water usage comes down to number of fixtures and, they blanket a 3-bedroom house as the standard for what you're doing, but it actually comes down to what you're permitted for and the number of fixtures in there. And so there are different ways of looking at this. Manufactured housing, instead of like the DES, smallest requirement of 2/3 of an acre, for manufactured housing, it's 10,000 square foot lot. And so there are also other creative ways of doing it where, it doesn't have to remain on your lot, the treatment, it can be on a separate lot. And so there are ways that we just don't use. And there's also a great number of, advanced processes, like Presby has a system that they've put out. And, there are a number of ways of doing this. So while we're on public for Dover, I think that there's a lot of opportunity to look at things, DES for septic.
Durham also is on sewage?
It is, yes.
That one is it.
Tricia.
Quick question.
And thank you guys for presenting different options. The 44 homes, are those going to stay, you're going to keep those 44 homes in your place? Because I know you said in Durham, is that the same for Dover as well? So you'll have those will be your homes for employees.
So we're gonna offer them to our employees first, but they'll be offered to the public as well.
For the one for sale.
They won't go for sale. Dover wanted us to keep as one owner, so they didn't have to deal with 44 owners in there, and so we will own them. And we've guaranteed that we'll keep them below the HUD fair market rent, which actually our policy will, any of our employees will still get the 30% or the 16 hours, so it'll be below the HUD level and everything, but that's what we've guaranteed, but we won't sell those. That was part of the agreement with Dover. We're open to selling them. People have asked us, would you do a project and sell them? We'd be open to it. It was the municipality that drove that.
Howard, yes, first question is for Brandon, in terms of the financial sustainability of the model. Your revenue stream is coming through in terms of lease of the building. Is there any adjustment that happens with that? Is that lease renewed annually, every 2 years, every 3 years?
Yeah, so first off, we don't have any leases yet, so this is all purely hypothetical. So you're talking about like the lease that the resident would have, or are you talking about the lease that the cooperative would have? Okay, yeah, the lease of the co-op. Wait, sorry, I'm still not sure.
So my understanding of the model is that the land trust owns the ground, and then you lease that ground.
Yeah.
To co-op.
Yeah, that's actually not the main revenues model. Like the lease would probably be like $1 for 99 years, just with certain stipulations attached. And we're currently we're in the process of fundraising to hire a business manager to help us finance or to look at what the path is. But in general, there could be certain stipulations like you pay off, your mortgage every single month as a resident on the co-op. X percentage of that can be kicked back to the community land trust as I understand that, kind of like a fee on top of that, like what you would pay.
And what's could you get a little more detail involved in your funding sources? You said private and government entities.
Yeah, so specifically, we are setting up, we have public meetings as a result, because it makes us more open to being able to get HUD grants. So in order to receive HUD grants, we have to have meetings where members of the public, we have to define a geographical area that you can attend meetings for. It would be so many miles outside of Manchester, you could go to one of our meetings. And then that would open us up to HUD funding, and there's even potential municipal funding as well too. Particularly, we're interested in how we could utilize funds from affordable housing trust funds. Like Manchester has recently committed to funding theirs. I forget how much though, and then there's going to be private fundraising as well too, is going to be another source of income as well. So it's going to be a lot of different sources of income that are going to be needed. So I can be more specific. If we had our finance director here, or sorry, our treasurer here, she would be able to better answer that for you. I'm just the secretary.
The other question I had is for the Randolph. You talked about affordability of rent. Is there also a component that you built into the design and construction in terms of affordability, in terms of monthly expenses, the utilities? Is there a high efficiency of hard rating, or these are LEED type of buildings?
These are at minimum Energy Star. I think the only reason why we don't reach net zero at this point is because we don't have triple pane windows. But again, we're working with certain budgets. So we have chosen to add extra insulation. So these are all above code. I will tell you that as we have, as it gets warmer outside, inside the units is freezing right now because it retains the temperature so well. So we are looking, we all have electric fixtures as well. I want to bring that up too. Someone asked about natural gas earlier. We chose to not have that on the property. It would be a great opportunity for solar as well. But for right now, basically, we're hoping to keep the utility costs as low as possible for the residents.
Our Durham location was, I think, about $80 to $85 per unit to heat over the wintertime. I mean, that's as tight as you can get.
One thing we recognize important in terms of people pursuing ownership is there's plenty of opportunity that's being created for 1 or 2 bedrooms. But there's also a missing component of 3 and 4 bedrooms. So I'm wondering if there's been any thought you've had of moving this model into a 3 to 4 bedroom type of.
So we just got done putting together a proposal for 2, 3, and 4 bedrooms. We're working with a municipality to do 32, 2, 3, and 4 bedrooms. That Maggie's designed that are not a lot larger than these current. They go up a little bit more, out a little bit more. But all's trying to stay under 900 square feet.
And keep in mind, in the 1950s, the average square footage for a home was 950 square feet. So we've grown dramatically on our home sizes. So just keeping that in perspective. So yes, we are developing that. We're also making sure that accessibility and so handicap accessibility as well, sight and hearing is a part of this. We've talked to veterans organizations as well. So it's not only the energy code as far as temperature, and that sort of thing, but it's also sound, working with veterans with PTSD and a lot of those amenities as well.
And the last answer to that, though, we are actually trying to complete the spectrum. We're looking at entry-level single-family homes as the project that would follow that. That's our goal.
Yeah.
One other question, and more about the sense of community. Is there a belief that this community will exist in terms of self-regulation? And what I mean by that is, as these different age groups are living, different age groups are going to want to have things outside, inside, that may not be welcomed or necessarily a visual appeal of their neighbors. So I'm wondering if there's anything that's written in to protect from those type of.
So we are working to make them community policed, meaning that they design the courtyards as far as plant life and those sort of things and stuff like that. At the end of the day, we'll still be a governing body to make sure things are put away, taken care of. Our reputation is tied to it. Our goal with the Dover project is every municipality in here would drive through and say, we want this in our town. That's really the Dover project. The other thing that I would also want to drive home, we mentioned it earlier, is these are firefighters, they're LNAs, they're young nurses, they're recent college graduates. They want to live somewhere that they're proud of also. They're not looking to, throw stuff all over their lawn and leave Christmas lights on all year long or whatever else, stereotypes or whatever else. We are finding, I've been a landlord for more than 25 years, and I get a kick out of when someone calls me and says, hey, your toilet's not working. And I said, no, my toilet's working fine. What did your child put in it? And everything else. And when I get there and I pull 3 blocks out of it, here's your $300 plumbing bill, because my toilet's working fine. It's an education process to teach them how to be a homeowner if they've been lifelong renters. And that's a continuing, ongoing process. I joked earlier, we had an employee that came in 40 hours a week and cut herself to 28 hours because her rent went from $1,500 to $700 when she started working for us. We went back and educated her on the opportunity to pay down her debt, invest, plan for the future. And so it's an ongoing process that we have of growing that community and growing those young professionals.
Thank you. Peter, if you guys start Brad, and I'll get to Zoom in a minute, guys, if there's any questions.
This is for James. I just want to hear a little bit more about the California grant program, pay for pre-construction costs.
Yeah, so the big takeaway from California is they set aside, the legislative body set aside $100 million to fund to the tune of $40,000 per household, 2,500 ADUs. Now, these all sound like really big numbers, but when you put it into perspective or proportion to the size of New Hampshire's population, that same program scaled for population would be $4 million and 100 units in New Hampshire. So it's totally a doable project. And the pretense of how it works is that many homeowners don't have any cash savings. You go and you hear, like, every once in a while there's these reports about people have 1 week of cash on hand, and that's like 1/3 or 2/3 of the population of the country have almost no savings, right? They're living week to week. Those same people may have a significant amount of equity in their home that they could tap into if only they could get to a place where they have a permitted unit to build that a bank would fund. But if you don't have the $20,000 it takes to get through permitting and approval, you can't get a bank loan to build the ADU. And so California saw this, understood that this was a problem holding back the majority of homeowners, and set out to fund the most riskiest portion of construction to facilitate ADUs. And so in a very short amount of time, like just a couple months, that $100 million was spent. People came out of the woodwork to snap up that opportunity. And it was income restricted, right? This isn't money that could just go to anybody. This was, you had to be less than 120% area and median income. So that's a working class household. And so all these, 2,500 working class households signed up for this grant in, 4 months, like something like that. And
It wasn't a loan, it was a grant.
it was a grant. We'll give you this money. And so it could be used for hiring a designer, getting through public permitting. And it could be used for site work. And if after all that you have money left over, you could buy down the interest rate on your loan. And the households didn't get this money. California Housing Authority didn't just give a $40,000 check to a homeowner. They said, oh, you have to go work with a nonprofit or a bank that will be your escrow manager, and they will qualify your expenses, and then we'll have an agreement with them that you're spending the public money appropriately. And so that works from a relationship standpoint, because then the bank can go and build a relationship with a homeowner with the expectation that they'll get a loan with them at the end. And A, and B, that mortgage lending officer is a rock solid case. They know exactly what's going on with that home through the permitting and approval process, because they were there the whole time.
We do have some storage on and off-site storage. We didn't highlight it, but there's a single family home on the property, which we're turning into a community center and a gym also. So that helps out a lot. But we have several other opportunities to do on and off-site storage.
Yeah, James, also the ADU laws in New Hampshire have been recently revised, but it's still fairly restrictive and not really conducive to the types of ADUs you're talking about, mono designs and things that don't look like a barn and a garage. And I was wondering if you'd done any study of the ADU laws in towns, and how much would have to change both the state and town to make the kind of models that you're talking about, multi-town ADUs work.
The state regulations allow towns to do virtually everything that you see in the case studies. The limitation comes through local control. And so the way the state law is structured is it gives the towns the options to allow detached ADUs or for ADUs to exist in situations where there's more than one instance of a dwelling unit. And so, if it's not, that's a hard conversation to have at the local level, right? Like, and go to your planning department, you say to the planning department, tomorrow I'd like to allow detached ADUs in my town. They'll take like a big gulp and be like, boy, we're gonna have to, vet this with the public and have a whole process. And so what I would say is, in that instance, this book is really useful in that it outlines that in all these situations, often technical assistance was provided in a way that was momentum building. So you might start with something like a design competition, or you might start with something like developing a checklist on the approval process in ADUs. And you may ask your planning department to develop annual ADU reports to report out on the numbers and the findings. And from those places, you can then make recommendations to revise your regulations at a local level. And that's something that can be an iterative process. That's the low risk, sort of low reward, long range planning approach to this. I think the housing crisis here requires maybe something more intense happen in a more urgent fashion. And I think, it's possible that maybe some of these things that are in the report at the state level, are instigated. So maybe we'll see changes in the state regulations. Maybe we'll see state grant programs to help facilitate homeowners, going through the permitting process. And those things might very well accelerate local decision-making around ADUs.
Can I just say, though, that I love the idea of ADUs. I think that they are it could be such a game changer for New Hampshire. And we talk about it all the time. I mean, John and Mark, my parents, they both live in, 4-bedroom homes, and, they don't go upstairs anymore. They heat the entire thing. And so what if you could build an ADU on the property, that's accessible, that's safe, it's really energy efficient. And then you could keep it, ownership of your home, and you rent it out to a young family. And so, what an opportunity to age in place. You're not losing the home. It still stays, your kids can still buy it eventually. You've got passive income. There's just so many things that, in just that one little track. So I'm super excited to see about these opportunities to make them more feasible.
Any other questions in the room? Oh, fine.
So quick question for John and Maggie. In your Durham site, it looked like you didn't have a lot of parking around that initial building that we saw on the screen. And I'm just wondering, given that your employees, your residents are working on the site, did you get some allowances from the town to reduce parking, or was there parking there and I just didn't? I'm of the mind that we have too much parking, and I think that's a big problem with our housing now, because it costs a lot to provide parking. I think that carries on through the years, so I just wondered how you address that.
Well, we have partially we have parking all over that campus. So what's right associated with that, they get one spot for their unit dedicated to them. And then they can have another spot, which is about 600 feet away if they absolutely need it. But most of them, I think only 1 or 2 have 2 vehicles out of the whole group of 7 that live there and stuff. I do think that when we start having 2 or more car requirements for a 1-bedroom apartment, I think you're gonna find out that you have more parking than you need in most cases.
It is expensive.
It's really expensive.
Thank you.
Yep.
Mark.
Do you have it in Durham?
That was the Durham one. Do you mean the Dover one? The Dover one we have. Yeah, the Dover one, I think we have 77 parking spots for 44 units. And so there's so many that are dedicated to visitors, but it's like 1.3 per unit. No, we're the first 13 are getting sheetrocked and getting water and sewer run to them, and we're going to do a phased opening. So hopefully those 13 will be open this summer.
Anyone on Zoom, because I've been collecting you guys for questions. I think they are.
Yeah, tell us what this is.
Where the state law works and it affords the towns an opportunity to legislate for ADUs, but it doesn't say attached or non-attached.
So the way the state RSA is written, there's the definition of an ADU is defined as attached. But then in the very next section, so that was 72. In 73, it says towns may opt to allow detached ADUs. So that's it's kind of interesting, because I find that a lot of times in my discussing this with various places, that a lot of elected or appointed staff individual planning board or zoning members aren't even aware that this is something they can do in their town. So there's just some outreach and education stuff that's very basic stuff that might be needed there.
Each town afford that often. But I'm sorry, I believe an attached is by right.
Yes.
And the detached is by additional vote.
Well, you're conflating the two, because a town could allow a detached by right if it wants to. Yes.
I think it's an issue for many people who've been in town for some period of time, that have grown up with one house for one lot. With attached, makes some sense, and the board of it actually affords a lot of what we said about, for baby boomers, some, additional revenue. To stay in their own homes, and then also provide that up. For the other family or one or two people.
There's this great,
It really has a big summary about people who say, hey, we've grown up with one house for a lot. Now, we just don't like the idea of having two houses. The percentage comes into play, because the percentage of the size of the ADU can now be greater or equal to the size of the home. Because then you're talking about a duplex at that point. It's not an accessory dwelling when it is a duplex. We allow a certain percentage that the ADU has to be smaller than a certain percentage of the home itself.
yeah, that's a tactic that's often used as a way to kind of control the aesthetic of it, the massing aesthetic. I just, to the point you were making about the benefits of it, one of the, there's this really nice AARP survey of New Hampshire residents 45 and older, and one of the key questions is, like, how, is aging in place like a top priority, like, or would you rather move to a different neighborhood in order to as you age, so that, if you have physical ailments and things. The survey basically found that 86% of all residents want to stay in their neighborhood no matter what. And they were willing to leave the house they're living in, but they don't want to leave their community. And so, and ADUs are a fantastic way to do that. Like she mentioned the scenario, the vast, I would say like 5 out of 6 of these things that get built are built for seniors that are downsizing out of their home and taking the equity from their home and building an ADU in the backyard of their kids' homes. And that's pretty much how they're getting done right now, because the financing tools aren't up and running correctly yet in New Hampshire. And so it's just kind of bears out what the AARP survey found. And
well, it makes economic sense. Those baby boomers, like to downsize, they can't afford to sell the existing home to get into a senior housing development. In our town, it's probably an average of 600,000 for a single family home. For a lot of these senior developments, starting 7.25, 7.50, it's practical.
Yeah.
And that's crazy. You could have essentially double the number of units to protect that. We've used and the people can afford to stay in place.
it's the most kind and most gentle form of density increase that New Hampshire can deploy.
Can I add real quick to what you're saying though? Can I add? I would also say it's not even a density add as much as, my parents grew up in a house with 4 kids. The 4 kids have moved on, they're still living in the same house. If they moved into the ADU and a family of 4 moved into the house, it would be the same density as before. We're losing the density. That's the problem. We're trying to stay in those houses. And all of our parents want to stay where they've been for a long time, but now you got a 3,000 square foot house with 2 people in it trying to heat it, and everything else. So, for us, we're trying to build my parents an ADU so they can move into the 1 level ADU with a washer, dryer, no basements, no upstairs, move a small family into that. What have you done? You've created a $600,000 or $700,000 house for the price of putting an ADU in the backyard. Yep.
When the older people staying in those homes, paying that tax bill, and helps educate the other generation, right? So when they come out of the ADU and you put another family in there, all of a sudden their taxation is greater than what they're giving to the system. You have to somehow have that balance. Yeah.
I just would like to say thank you to all of you. You've really instilled a lot in my mind, and I know I have all your emails. I'm gonna have more questions, but I'll reach out. I would just like to share with the group that since last June, in Portsmouth, we have been doing an outreach to our community to update our ADUs. We are one of the communities that originally, right at the start, actually allowed detached and attached. We went ahead and adopted that through conditional use permits. And one of the barriers that we found out is the expense to actually getting through the approvals of all our boards. They were saying, easily $30,000 before you even put any construction forward. So we have just a week ago, this past Monday, I'm very proud of this. passed a new ADU amendment, or we basically revamped the whole thing. And we're allowing certain units, if you have a house and you want to take a floor and you're not doing anything outside, through administrative approval, we are going to allow you to do that, so they actually don't have to go forward. If you have an existing structure, a garage or something, and you're only going to build up to 600 square feet, you can do that through administrative approval. So if anybody is interested in taking a look at what we just passed, and better than that, help homeowners out, my new community housing navigator is working on a how-to handbook for homeowners, so that they will have a very easy step-by-step of how to actually do ADU. So if anyone's interested, either Howard, I would be happy to share that with you. Thank you. It's my plug for ADU.
We're closing in on our.
Yes.
8 o'clock limit.
It's time to adjourn. Is there anything else for anyone to say?
I want to, again, like to thank everyone for joining us tonight and.
Very inspiring.
In the room, next meeting is June, it's our annual meeting. You should have gotten a nominating committee report.
Yeah, we've talked a lot about this at the Manchester Housing Alliance. That definitely, a lot of our members have been fascinated by.
I was welcome.
It's one time.